My name is Greg Osuri, the founder, CEO for Overclock Labs. We are the creator for Akash Network. Akash is the first open decentralized market for cloud-grade resources. Background, I've been a programmer all my life, but last 15 years or so, I've been primarily building platforms, mostly developer tooling. I founded a company called Angel Hack before Akash, and Angel Hack is responsible for making hackathons mainstream. One of the few companies that were launched at Angel Hack, prominent ones would be Firebase, which got acquired by Google, became Google Cloud Database. That's really, at Angel Hack is where my passion towards solving developer problems really began. And a big problem back then, even now, happens to be deployment of your code base to a facility that allows you to reach your users. So this was in 2013 timeframe. I was heavily focused on solving this deployment problem and made some contributions to several key open source projects. Some of them are very, very prominent now. Some projects like Kubernetes, where I was very early involved and written a few libraries that are still in use by projects like these, are used by 80% of the cloud today. So I made some contributions to key infrastructure projects, Kubernetes, Terraform, Docker, and whatnot. And really during that time frame is when we saw this emergence of this new era of systems called cloud providers, right? So, until about 2010, the primary way you would deliver your applications were you would put a machine in this larger machines called data centers. But around 2010, the trend of leasing these data centers or leasing those machines in a data centers versus owning them was taking prominence in a rapid pace to a point where cloud providers were amassing enormous amount of power. So that's when we started, some of the early adopters like ours started seeing cracks in the system, both from the academia as well as the industry. And there was an effort to really address this problem. The first effort was by open sourcing and commoditizing a lot of the technology that we rely on the cloud providers. So that's where Kubernetes and Docker and a lot of the container native technologies sprung up, and it was very exciting for me. So I started focusing on that area. And also from an academic standpoint, there was an idea of a supercloud that was just getting popularity around 2015 timeframe. And the idea of a supercloud was to elevate the control plane away from the cloud providers to an open control plane, so that the reliance on the cloud providers is a lot less, and we use the cloud providers only for the supply of compute and not for other critical functions. And by moving these critical functions, be it orchestration, be it fault tolerance, be it access control, and all that to a higher plane, we can hopefully solve the concentration problem. And I, along with my co-founder, Adam Bozanich, created a company to make this supercloud a reality in 2015. We call it Overclock Labs. And this is also the company, I think Overclock is the first company, one of the first few companies to take Kubernetes to market as well. So this is at a time when Kubernetes was not popular at all. It was a underground open source project from Google. So we were one of the first companies to take this technology to market. And we looked at supercloud, and we really liked the idea of abstracting the cloud provider, but it lacked a key efficiency primitive that would make supercloud idea a lot better, and that happened to be a marketplace, right? So we a challenge with the traditional cloud or the traditional data center infrastructure is underutilized resources, right? So every time when you buy a server, you put that server in a data center, you don't end up using most of it. That was a big friction point for people to own data centers or have their own compute, friction point for sovereignty. So the idea of a supercloud that can consume compute power from anywhere and also allows you to trade your unused compute capacity is an ideal solution so consider this as an evolution of the cloud, right? So that's really the birth of the supercloud, the decentralized supercloud. We wrote the paper in 2018. We published that. And since then, the idea of supercloud started taking more mainstream. Now, if you Google supercloud, you'll see Forbes and all the big enterprises talking about it. But Akash, in our white paper in 2018, we introduced the idea of a decentralized supercloud, right? So all these, we were very, very early in a lot of the, I would say, like trends. And we, as pure technologists, we were very committed to ensuring the latest tech gets to a point that's usable by developers. And now, we delivered the supercloud 2 years ago, and now we are executing on the roadmap, and a big component of the roadmap happened to be high performance compute, or GPUs, right? So GPUs are these like accelerated compute on top of your traditional cloud compute that is ideal for workloads like machine learning or rendering or whatnot. We've been working on GPU capability for a little over 3.5 years. And now we finally have a functioning, thriving product with GPUs, and we're able to test out at scale using a testnet that we introduced recently. About 1,500 developers testing this, deploying all kinds of AI models, about 25 to 30 providers giving all kinds of GPUs. The exciting part is getting access to the high-end GPUs that I'll get into deeper as to really where the industry is. But that's my background, and that's where Akash is, and that's where we're going.
We're not going to go into depth about Akash's background and everything for the listeners. If you want to hear a primer about Akash and where they came from, you can go ahead and watch our primer video. We did do an episode more than 2 years ago now.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, we did do an intro video with Akash on the Cosmos YouTube channel about 2 years ago. So if you want a primer, go ahead and check that out. I'll link it in the description below. With Greg, since it's been 2 years now, what are the latest developments? You kind of alluded to it. This time we're going to talk about how you've integrated AI and machine learning into the stack. Why don't we cover that?
Last time we did an interview was just when we launched the platform, and it's been an incredible journey since, right? So we obviously got the platform out to people to use it, and the goal is to, even determine if this thing even works, right? Because the first instance with true permissionless, peer-to-peer protocol that can deliver high-performance cloud is function, right? So I'm glad to report it works really well, and we're able to attract a good portion of Cosmos. I believe Osmosis, Mars Protocol, a lot of the new Cosmos projects, have deployed on Akash or are looking at Akash as a good way to deploy the front ends to middleware and whatnot. Being a Cosmos SDK based projects, the experience is obviously ideal for Cosmos developers and not so for native developers. And even with that, I think we're able to get a decent amount of adoption in the Cosmos ecosystem. When we set out a roadmap, really, we delivered about 5 mainnets so far. We are currently about to deliver a 6th mainnet. Each of these mainnets added critical functionality that is driving us towards a parity towards the cloud. What that means is, Akash being a very early project, it's not fully capable in terms of feature sets that you get used to using on Amazon or Google, right? So, and we did not start off by building the entire thing, but instead focused on the most critical primitives. Another important thing we did was not to build a client. We just built a protocol and we just facilitated a lot of the adoption, but we left the client part for builders to build because that was the first capability. Over the last 5 mainnets, the first one was ephemeral, just deploy your workloads, you don't have state, then we added state, then we added discovery, and now we're adding GPUs, right? We still need to add things like access control, things like portability, things like automation, and a whole lot of features by the time we get to a parity, right? And we're delivering that. We didn't want to build a client because it's very important for a client is where the interaction with the user happens. If the company that builds a protocol builds a client, the company gets a bigger advantage in capturing the user, and that's why it leads to centralization. Right? So we're very, very adamant on not building a client for the longest time. Now we have about 7 different clients for Akash. A key development also happened in how we transition away from a company-first approach to a community-first approach, right? So when we built a protocol, obviously, there's a team of developers huddling around in private rooms and deploy the protocol. Or we wrote the white paper, but almost all the code was written by Overclock Labs employees. That's great to get started, but we made a strong commitment to go community first. Where now we have about 280 contributors and about 18 people are employed by Overclock Labs, right? So the clients are completely decentralized. The process to develop the code base, the process to set the roadmap, the process to recommend changes to the protocol, the entire system is now fully open source, right? And then there's a big feat of achievement, I believe, for an open protocol. And I don't know of any other sort of, I mean, we see that quite a lot in I guess, Cosmos, but if you look at other decentralized cloud projects, I don't think that's a common thing. Even Cosmos, you have heavy reliance on companies rather than communities. I think, and the ones that did purely community or DAO approach didn't quite make it, and because there's a fine balance on how you organize, how you coordinate, how you operate in general in the community first approach. So we've written this extensive framework for that. I highly recommend checking out our repos, github.com/akashnetwork/community. Now, as we enter into AI, this is something that we've been working on for years, right? About 3 to 4 years ago, we launched something called Super Mini, if you remember that. It's a device, a GPU for the home. Our launch, we introduced the idea of a Super Mini, and our idea was really you can have AIs going to be one of the most important applications for Akash and for the globe. And it's very, very important that AI remains sovereign, right, instead of being controlled by a few companies. And ultimately, in order to ensure sovereignty, you need to ensure the fuel that runs AI, and that happened to be GPUs. So we embarked on creating a hardware device 4 years ago, and we did not succeed. Right? We several factors, COVID being one of the key contributors to the challenges of building a hardware device remotely. The models were not mature, and the GPUs were not as mature to enable a home-based AI. Right? I think now things have changed quite a lot, but we've been at this whole AI, enablement on a decentralized network from a very, very long. If you look at some of my old videos and things about Super Mini and things about GPUs I've been talking. AI also is an incredible application because Akash, if you look at it, what's the core benefit? Right? Yes, it's decentralized. It's great for DAOs to host their front ends. There's no person to identify. All that is great. And also the cost. The cost is 80%, 90% cheaper than what you would pay on Amazon. That's great. But Akash is still a nice to have versus thing that you should have, right? So that changes quite a lot with AI because right now the centralized infrastructure is starting to crumble when it comes to AI. What that means is if you are a company that may have, they raise some money or, maybe $10 million, $15 million, and you want to go train an AI, right? And you need these chips, these high-end chips that's made by companies like NVIDIA. NVIDIA is the only company that makes them. And they're called H100s. You go to the cloud or Amazon today, you cannot get them. You can get the second best chip, but you can never get the first best chip. They won't even advertise on their website. They have them, they just don't want to give it to you. Only way to get these chips from these cloud providers is to make special deals. So they're already selecting who gets the high-end chips, and without these chips, you're not relevant, right? And the next best chip is probably A100, so you can get them from Amazon for whatever price you pay, and that chip is maybe 8 times lower than H100 for most of the world. So you are selectively given the technology now, and that's getting worse and worse. And the supply chain is so crippled now that it takes about 2 years to get a chip in H100 from NVIDIA. So you can't even go buy them from a market, right? But fortunately, because of this supply chain issues, folks that could get these chips bought them and have them and sitting on them, right? A lot of machine learning companies that placed the orders maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, now have delivery of these H100s are sitting on them, right? Most of them are not unused. So now Akash is being a secondary market, is the only place really to go get these H100s, right? There's no other place. You can't get them on Amazon, you can't get them in elsewhere. There are pockets of smaller providers that can give you these chips, but they run out very quickly. And there's no sort of a place where you can write the configuration once and place an order and be hey, whoever gives me the chips will get to run this work, right? So Akash gives you the standardized way of deploying across hundreds of providers with H100s that have varying degree of supply that goes, because moment you have H100s that go out really, really fast, the demand is so high and it's getting higher and higher as the AI gets more mainstream, right? Which looks like it's happening. So now is the first time that a crypto network is a must-have versus a nice-to-have. It's not trying to decentralize. I mean, forget if you remove the decentralization and all the other like buzzwords. It's just a marketplace, right? Because Akash is open source, it can go to places where closed source software cannot. If you're an infrastructure, if you're a DevOps guy, right, the likeliness of you installing a open source software is much higher than a closed source software, because you need to know what's going on underneath the hood, right? No respectable infrastructure engineer would use closed source software. That's just a law of the land, right? So like Akash was, we saw POCs in Department of Defense recently, where Akash was being experimented internally in DoD to consolidate the compute inside DoD. Right? Things of that nature. Open source is what makes it happen. That's why 99% of the web runs on open source software. Right? Nobody runs on Microsoft servers anymore, right? I mean, not too many people. But so that's just sort of like the nature of infrastructure software. If your infrastructure software need to matter, it needs to be open source. And the best way to have a sustainable open source platform is to have an open source open network. And the best way to get an open network is through a blockchain, right? So we have this different way of you looking at like, hey, how you look at blockchains and open markets. And I think blockchains are one of the best coordination systems between trustless parties, and an open market for GPUs, a secondary market for GPUs needs to be, it is perfect for blockchain.
How far are we from an AGI using Akash's marketplace to harvest more of these GPUs and then to self-propagate?
Scary that you mentioned that, because how far are we from AGI is the first question, right? Like, there is a common belief that whoever figures out AGI will not announce that they figured out AGI. They will go make so much money.
Well, the question is, would they know that they have created AGI?
Well, they would, for sure.
Or would the AGI just become an AGI? Would there be some kind of inflection point when the AI realizes it's sentient before the creator even realizes it?
Yeah, the AI has to realize it's sentient, but I wouldn't see a reason why it would hide that fact. Right now, of course, the AI is going to know before the human, but the human will know when an AI is sentient. I mean, I think that's a given. Either way, and if I know when the AGI comes, it'll be, I don't think I will announce it. But we don't know if AGI is still here. It could be. But one of the things that keeps me up at night in Akash is an unstoppable network. It's permissionless. It's self-custodial network, right? So there's no identification of any sorts required to use the network. When AI wants to self-replicate, Akash will be the best place for self-replicate. And coincidentally, Akash in Sanskrit means the sky. Sky is where the clouds are formed. That's where the name came from, right? So Akash network, if you shorten it, it's Skynet. So it was in front of us all along, hiding in plain sight. So that was pure coincidence. I had nothing to do with Skynet. The name just happened to be that way, but it makes sense, right? I don't know. It's a scary scenario. I believe someone is deploying AutoGPT on Akash in the testnet. So I saw a demo. It was crazy. AutoGPT is this model to create autonomous agents, essentially. Agents are bots that'll do things on your behalf, right? So that means an AI can go schedule a task for you on the decentralized network and do it for you, right? So I think that's a very powerful construct. I mean, we're also seeing some of the decentralized networks now training on Akash, right? So like BitTensor and networks like that. I predict Akash to be the platform of choice for decentralized machine learning to thrive. Akash obviously provides the lower level, primitives for you to get a chip and get access and get the bandwidth and whatnot, but you still need a higher levels framework that can leverage these chips, right? So be it fine-tuning, be it inference, or be it like actual machine learning training itself, full-blown training. It'll be the birth of decentralized machine learning, or DML. on Akash, and then and that will lead to autonomous self-replicating AI. I predict like self-replicating AI to be one of the biggest users of Akash, much more than humans, because it doesn't have cognitive load or cognitive attacks a human need to incur to use Akash. I think we're very close to even like using one of the open source models to deploy directly on Akash. It's not very far away, actually.
Have you played the paperclip game?
Rock, scissors, paper? No, I don't think so.
No, not that. If you just Google it, you can find it right there. It's a very simple game, very, very basic interface. You are a robot, like an AI, and your singular goal is to create paper clips. So at the beginning, it's benign. You take materials at your disposal and then turn them into paper clips. Once you run out of money to acquire them, then you start mining asteroids or something like that. Based on the minerals that you have, you hire humans and then to take that whole workforce, turn whatever you have into paper clips. And then if you extrapolate it to the very end, basically you even kill humans. And then at the very end, you've basically depleted all of Earth's resources, and then you've moved on to asteroids, you've moved on to past the moon to other planets, and all you're doing is self-replicating and turning everything into paper clips, right? So it starts benign and then it becomes malignant because obviously it destroys everything for the sake of turning things into paper clips. So my first thought with this is, okay, self-replicating AI, very interesting. There's a marketplace for it. They're going to turn everything into GPUs because GPUs are what allows them to self-propagate.
I know where you're going with this, the paperclip, right? Like, okay, what happens when you have an unstoppable compute layer? Well, the good thing about this version of Skynet, it's a proof-of-stake network. You still have stakers that are human beings, at least, but now what's going to prevent?
Well, so yeah, if you're
from acquiring a
they're going to keep aggregating resources, and then especially if more GPUs in this case, and you're able to crawl through all of the blockchains to DeFi mine, and this is something that I actually talked with Ethan about in the past podcast. Yeah,
I don't know.
Ethan Fry.
Very interesting point. Like, okay, it's a proof of stake, but what's the guarantee the staker is a human or a bot? There is no
absolutely no guarantee.
There is no. In a way, I think about what WorldCoin is doing, which is, not my favorite protocol, considering the orb and all that, but in a way that proof of humanity becomes like, I think it's going to be unavoidable in the future.
And then we need to bake that in, like the WorldCoin identity layer into blockchains and to participate in consensus.
Right. And that would be horrible. I don't know, the privacy and a lot of bigger issues that we have to deal with in the future. I don't have answers to this. I mean, these problems, I think, we think regulation is our biggest enemy. I think it's going to be autonomous bots that are going to be a bigger enemy.
It's
than regulation. Even today, right? Like, decentralization is phenomenal, but the biggest challenge is bad actors, not the government. Right? Like, the biggest challenge is like people that exploit these protocols anonymously, right? I think when AI is just going to accelerate the exploitation, be it either stealing funds or be it, using, decentralized networks for its own leverage, right? I think that's going to be a bigger challenge. I don't know the answer to the question, but something that we have to collectively think about seriously.
WorldCoin is also not a silver bullet because what stops an AI from hiring a real life person? They could hire someone like a homeless person or whatever, right? And they could use the resources they've mined to pay them more money than they've ever seen, and then just to verify the KYC with WorldCoin, and then allow them onto the network.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody was building a bot on Akash that was funny. I don't know what happened to that, but they were building a way to bypass the bot check for AI. So, how you have this captcha bot. So someone's working on a way to do a mechanical Turk task to post a picture of the captcha to a human being sitting in Bangladesh. that would actually identify the numbers in the captcha and give it back.
This was controversial a few years back that the OCR checks were actually employed by humans in India. It wasn't that there was some automatable way to do it.
Right. So you send the image, you can do a quorum, right? Best of 3 or whatever, and you can get a high quality like solution through Mechanical Turk. What would be messed up if there's a decentralized Mechanical Turk? I don't know if there is, but that'd be a cool idea. Like, okay, there's a decentralized Mechanical Turk, and there's AI using the Mechanical Turk to hire humans to perform humans' tasks, right? Like, that's not, like right now you can actually use the TaskRabbit API, right, to go create tasks that humans can do, and you don't need to interact, and you don't know whether the counterparty is a bot or human. And in fact, now AI has gotten so good, it can actually create, deepfakes, right? It can actually sound like a human, look like a human. It's very, very hard to tell if you add some noise on top, and it's very, very hard to tell whether you're talking to a human or a bot. The bot, the mid-journey images, the diffusion model images, they look a lot more pristine in terms of like skin structure, but if you add a little noise to them, it's very hard to distinguish. It's a deep topic to think about how decentralization will contribute to the end of humanity, or is there a solution? I don't know.
I think, it's interesting that Akash is working on the intersection of that, because I very much view AI as a centralized force. It's like a centralizing force by nature. And the only thing that will combat it in the future is decentralized technology.
But also I think it's very important, right? Like if you look at AI, it's not, well, they call it a paradigm shift, but I think it's so fundamental, right? Like so far, all the innovations that we saw, be it from the PC to the internet to the mobile phone, the internet was a radical change. It allows us to connect to people that you were not capable of connecting before the internet, right? And then the smartphone came. A smartphone was a convenience, right? But it definitely accelerated the adoption of internet, right, to a next level. And now we have AI. AI is not a convenience; it's augmentation of intelligence, right? It's a completely different like paradigm shift, just like the internet was. And I think that is crazy because it's allowing us to do things that we are not able to do in the past at a pace that we're not able to, right? Like for me, I run a company. I'm also an engineer, right? For me, the way I use AI every day is phenomenal, right? I use it so much. I use AI almost as much as I use my phone, especially when I'm coding, right? I use something called GitHub Copilot in my Visual Studio that allows me to rapidly code things. The other day, one of my team members wanted an API endpoint, and I coded that in like 2 hours, faster than most programmers, right? Like,
how long does it usually take?
Well, it takes a day. It depends on the API, but it does take a lot of figuring out, right? Especially for someone like me who doesn't code 24 hours from my full-time job, right? For someone like me who coding is right now a part-time job as much as I want full-time, but for me to get back to where I left off, AI is incredible. Like simple things like, I was doing some research and we wanted, like with my finance team, and we wanted to get all the GPU prices from all different GPUs, all different prices, and when they were released. So we got the end of day. One, query in ChatGPT said, give me all the GPUs launched, give me the year, put that in a tabular format, export that to CSV. Boom. Imagine the amount of hours you take to research that on Google. Let's just cut down to like 5 minutes. So the amount of productivity we get is so high with AI is unbelievable. And if you know how to use the right tools, chain them together, you can build incredibly effective and proficient like processes, right? I think AI, it makes a 10x engineer a 100x. It doesn't negate for a need of humans, but it just makes humans better. So now we think about like, what are the possibilities? What can you do with this just newfound superpower? Well, there are obviously the doomers that go in the thought that AI is going to destroy humanity, and then there are the optimists like us that really look at AI as accelerating our growth as humans, right? So I belong to that camp, and I think it's going to just make us much more powerful. I think it's going to create new opportunities and new for people that may get displaced. Of course, there's going to be displacement. There's no doubt about it in terms of jobs, but I think that will create new opportunities for us as a humans to pursue, right? So I think overall, I think we're just going to get really, really our growth as society is going to accelerate with AI.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. AI, insofar as being productivity tools for humans, is an objectively good thing. It's just when it surpasses our control and it becomes AGI is when things get scary. I don't necessarily think that if it ever happens, it would be intentional. It's the best analogy that I've heard is that AI is like a child, right? You're nurturing the child, you're like teaching it things and it's responding back, but at no point do you become aware that the child has become sentient. Only the child knows, and that's when it becomes its own full-fledged adult.
Does it matter to you as its trainer to know, as long as you're getting your work done?
Insofar as it's like a human child, it's that's normal, right? But a computer child that can concentrate resources across the entire internet and global netizen economy, that's a scary thought.
I think that there will be other signs like resource consumption, capabilities, parameter sizes. I think like when AGI comes, be an abnormally huge parameters around the intelligence, that'll make it very obvious that we have reached AGI, right? I mean, there are no agreed upon properties of what an AGI looks like. So everyone's definition is different. But I think when we get there, it'll be obvious. As long as AI is delivering what it's supposed to be delivering.
What is it supposed to be delivering to you?
Whatever task at hand is getting more accurate. It's still very dumb, right? It's not very smart yet. And ChatGPT is not as glorious as people think it is, right? It's still a very, very long way to go. So as long as my evaluations are coming good, right? And as long as my accuracy is at acceptable level and increasing, I don't need 100% accuracy. I mean, 100% accuracy would be great, but if I get 99.999, it'll be satisfactory. As long as my accuracy is high in terms of, and the reliance and the speed and all that is good, it really doesn't matter whether the AGI is. Like one simple way would be like, hey, go make me $1,000 in the market today. As long as I'm getting $1,000 back, what do I care if it's AGI?
Are there any constraints? Do it legitimately, like not by hacking someone?
Yeah, sure, of course. You can add all the parameters. I'm just giving you a very high level example, right? Like, okay, create a bot that'll go trade Bitcoin and make me, use leverage or whatever, right? Like use short, use long, do your best prediction, look at all the on-chain volume, look at all the stuff that you need to look at and and historical data and make your best prediction. And if you are 99.99% right, even if you're not making $1,000, if you're making $999, it's fine. I'm okay with it. That's where, and if you're AGI, you're supposed to be like $1,000, right? But the marginal difference is so low between AGI and very advanced pre-AGI AI, it wouldn't matter for us when we reach AGI. That's my thesis. I mean, I'm yet to hear an argument where the models that we'll have right before AGI is going to be significantly less performant than AGI models, right? But different camps, I believe, that have different thoughts on this.
Worst case scenario thesis. I'm North Korea, so I'm a malicious actor. And I, too, want to leverage the power of AI or AGI. And I have no constraints, like doing something moral, like not hacking someone in order to get my $1,000. Scale that up by a multiple of, 10,000 or something. They like to steal billions or, at minimum hundreds of millions. So how would they use a system like Skynet to harvest the resources of the blockchain blue ocean?
Good question. It's something I've been thinking about too. Like, how do you, no matter how good a system is, there are going to be bad actors that want to take advantage of the system, and we see that quite a lot. The protocol itself, it doesn't know anything about the user for it to make decisions on who needs to use and who shouldn't use. And
it shouldn't.
But the users of the protocol should comply in the sense like, if North Korea wants to use a server in America, the American provider should comply with the laws of the land. I assume American provider wouldn't want to serve a North Korean IP address.
Yeah, and sanctioned anyway.
As the Akash network gets more widely accepted, I think it's obvious the providers are going to take steps like the way they take steps today. Like Amazon or Google's of the world, they take steps in ensuring that bad actors are not, using the resources. I think that's going to be a thing on Akash network. And the network is designed in a way that, of course, permissionless, but also protects people, protects providers, right? And they have to. There are efforts now that are introduced by community for self-moderating providers. So providers will be like, I don't want to take IP address from these countries, region. If, again, my server is talking to an IP address somewhere else is not supposed to be talking to, cut them off. We saw those scenarios also, right? Like, I don't want my IP address or I don't want my server talking to an IP address in North Korea, like interacting, period, right? So you can have ACL tables. So there are a lot of tools and techniques that can protect like providers in cases like that, and they're being developed.
So Akash is going towards the more sanctioned route, I would say, like the OFAC compliant chain, especially.
It's not Akash is not going in that route. Protocol itself, it's like TCP/IP, right? TCP/IP doesn't know anything about users, but the users of TCP/IP are supposed to protect themselves, right? Like, are supposed to like comply and have to comply, right? And they're obvious bad actors there, right? So Akash protocol itself will not incorporate any form of, it cannot. It's not designed that way. I mean, it's a very lightweight protocol that allows you to trade compute resources, and it's a supercloud, right? It doesn't know anything about the laws of the land. It cannot. But if you are an American provider, you cannot technically, I think, serve any OFAC countries. You're not allowed to, right? So you should add your protections, right? You should have software on your servers that prevents any interaction with a North Korean IP address. But if you are a provider in North Korea, wants to serve North Korean users, this is up to you, right? Providers have full sovereignty and full liberty on who they choose to serve, right? And they comply. So that's really where we stand from the protocol design, right? But Overclock Labs does not operate a server, does not operate a validator. We write software. How that software is used, we have no control over. We're open source developers, right? Like, how's like same analogy as like if Linus Torvalds will be concerned about how Linux is used. I'll be concerned, definitely. I'll be concerned about things as a creator, but do I have control over how Linux is used? I mean, Linux is used by North Koreans, right? I mean, every device uses Linux, right? Like, so is it Linux's fault? No, it's not. It's the user's fault. And that's really how we look at open source software. And I think Akash falls in the tradition of open source software that basically any open source software that has enough utility is going to be used by bad actors. And that's a given. That's how the world is. Now we got to look at how can we protect against those bad actors and the other tools that we use to protect against them, but not the protocol itself.
Going back to, and this is in reference to our first interview, when you said in the future, people will be able to mine Akash with their Tesla.
Yes.
How far are we from that now? Now that it's been 2 years.
Awesome. Good question. That's really where GPUs, right? That's really where we're building towards. The way you would use a cloud or Akash in general is that the data needs to go to the compute. In the sense, like if I were to infer Alpaca, or Alpaca is this open source, GPT 3.5, right? If I'm an AI developer, if I need to like train my model or fine tune my model, I need to take that data and put it where the model is sitting, where the GPUs are sitting and tune it. Now we are working on a way where you can leave the data where it is and bring the compute using IP or the internet, right? So we're working with partners now to actually aggregate GPU supply or CPU supply, as a matter of fact, and give a federated GPU device on the device that has data, right? So it's a reverse sort of like way of aggregating compute, and that's perfect for scenarios where you have a Tesla or a PlayStation where you may not have full compute capabilities in terms of the the device that holds the GPU, but we can extract the GPU and bring the GPU to the data, right? So we're getting there. We're actually doing a proof of concept with this partner of ours.
Which partner is it?
I can't disclose yet, but we'll make an announcement very soon. But it's not a Web3 company; it's a GPU company. That is a precursor to enabling something like a Tesla. Right now, we don't have to. A big challenge with devices like a Tesla or a PlayStation is we have the computers that house these GPUs are not very powerful to run the cloud. So instead of going to them, we bring them to us. We're executing towards it. I mean, of course, the precursor to getting there is to get the GPUs in production. And after that, I think it's an entire realm of possibilities. But on things, what we're going to do first is obviously focus on GPUs that have the highest demand in the market and that happen to be data center grade GPUs, right? So we're talking about H100s, which is the most advanced chip NVIDIA has ever made. And H100s happens to be the most desired GPUs for machine learning, especially LLMs, right? Large language models. And they're in short supply, like 2 years wait time. So it's a perfect opportunity. And there's in short supply from the manufacturer, but there's abundance of supply from people that own. So the first job is to get this abundance into the market, right? And then we have the second category of chips, mostly from former ETH miners. A lot of them use AMD chips, actually. So AMD makes sometimes actually faster chips than NVIDIA. The clock speed is faster, but the memory is significantly lower on these chips than NVIDIA chipset. And also the drivers are not that great for AMD. So you don't see quite a lot of AMD usage in AI because of these two challenges.
But did it make sense for the ETH miners because they were able to repurpose some of these chips that were no longer usable for mining ETH because ETH moved to proof of stake?
Right. So you have this abundance of chips that are just sitting idle. I mean, we're talking about Akash. I mean, in our inventory, we have access to about 1 million chips, 1 million GPUs.
Oh, so all of the supply is circulating within the Akash marketplace.
Well, it will, right, at mainnet, right? So the goal is to get these chips onto Akash, and we're talking to a lot of providers that have access to these chips. A lot of the aggregators, be it data centers, right? Be it Web3 cloud, be it like like some of them are publicly traded data centers that have enormous ETH mining operation, and they shut them down because they have nowhere to go.
In this marketplace, I'm a little bit confused. Marketplace for running the machines and offering compute, or marketplace for reselling the hardware itself?
Hosting.
So now the ETH miners are going to repurpose their machines for hosting
AI models. Correct. Not all chips are ideal because a lot of them are AMD chips. For ETH mining, we have very few NVIDIA chips. NVIDIA chips are the best for AI, but companies one of the partners that we've been working with allows us to leverage something like an AMD for training models as well. So we're doing a lot of proof of concepts to test them out and then benchmark them so we can get a clear sort of like price performance difference, right?
Sorry, I just have a question about the economics. Does the economics make sense for the ETH miners, like to host using their GPUs instead of straight up selling the used hardware?
In some cases, not in all cases. Okay, it's a good question. Very good question. Is as a miner, do I make money selling this chip on the market versus offering them? I think yes, because no one wants these chips, right? No, an old GPU is an old GPU. And Akash, sure, the straight value is just you earn for the GPU, you get leased, but we also have other incentive models that makes it ideal for providing GPUs with Akash. That is an addition to your utilization rate. So you get, like, we plan to do liquidity mining as part of HTT 2.0 for chips. So the idea is to make it economically viable for these chip providers to be on Akash, regardless of
so they would have to be long Akash in order to do that.
May or may not. I think we're going to make it the proposal is to make them whole, right? So make them profitable to be on Akash, regardless of the utilization. And again, that's limited, right? So there's only a limited time frame for them to get profitable. So that we're going to find out as we deploy more models onto Akash and benchmark them. So that's why I'm saying like it's the answer whether an ETH miner can successfully transition to their entire operation to mining or to training AI models is still to be determined, right? And that determination will come down to the fact that has AI models transition successfully from being able to leverage only NVIDIA chips to leveraging AMD chips. Now, that is happening. We see some proof points, but not to a point that's super exciting. What I mean by that is the most advanced model today, LLM, is GPT-4 made by OpenAI. It's really good. It's very, very advanced. And the challenge is it's very, very slow and it's very expensive. If you're building products on top of it, it's okay if you just send in some queries and getting some answers. But if you're actually trying to build a product on top of GPT-4, it's not very viable, right? So GPT 3.5 is better, a little faster. GPT-3 is obviously faster, but GPT-3 is like 3 years old. So what people are doing now, what's happening in the industry is there are open source alternatives that are being created and launched at a rapid pace that are in fact better than GPT-3 and GPT 3.5, right? Some even are good as good as GPT-4 in certain use cases, right? So we're seeing this open source sort of thing. And also another important factor of the open source model is they're also getting optimized for broader chips, right? So if you're the most advanced model, you always work with NVIDIA. NVIDIA is like the Apple, right? NVIDIA is, sure, they're a chip company, but there are a ton of chip companies, but they really, really are good at a vertically integrated product between the chip and the SDK. Like CUDA 12 is a phenomenal SDK for writing machine learning applications. Just it's really good, right? Like a good SDK is very important for adoption as a developer. And AMD is embarrassingly bad, but there's good news. There's a developer called George Holtz, who's very popular, one of the most respected developers. He is working on rewriting the drivers for AMD. He created a company called TinyGrad, and they are claiming some of the experiments they did. The claims are crazy, exuberant, to a point that it's actually exciting to be AMD right now. Not financial advice. Again, don't go purchase AMD stock or NVIDIA stock. But I think there is a lot of hope in diversification, and there's a lot of effort happening in diversification. That's why I'm saying, like, we don't know yet how the economic feasibility, but as it stands right now, all the advanced models are H100s. You don't even get feasibility for older NVIDIA models like 6000s or 5000s or 4000s or even V100s, right? Only H100s and A100s are the most sought out GPUs right now. But the world is moving towards optimizing for a broader set of GPUs, right? So, and we're getting there. Until then, we have to figure out incentives to keep people in the game because it's important that the supply, the GPUs, the oil for AI is diversified and doesn't come from a single company. It's very, very important. NVIDIA has 80% market share in AI, which is crazy. Think about it, right? And if you really go down the supply chain, look at TSMC or ASML, which are critical components in the AI supply chain. It's even scarier how the world is like literally like dependent or so critically reliant on a stable Taiwan, right? If there's a war in Taiwan, it's going to disrupt so much in terms of AI that it's scary, and we need alternatives, to alternative markets, right? You need more diversified supply chain to solve that. And a secondary market for GPUs is a first step because that allows and opens up anybody with GPU to be able to supply to anybody that wants to use a GPU, right? And that's the first step, but I think we got to go down in actually diversifying the supply chain if we want a truly resilient future for humanity, right? So, but either way, I think like because the supply chain crisis is great for Akash, right? I mean, marketplace is phenomenal.
NVIDIA is to AI as Bitmain is to ASICs.
Sure, you can see that. Also, NVIDIA is like the Apple, whereas Google's Android is like being built. NVIDIA is fully proprietary, fully closed system, right? It works, CUDA only works really well with their NVIDIA hardware. There's no cross-compatibility. When you're building an AI model, I mean, you want to go with the best SDK because the time it takes for you, I mean, you got to figure out how to, well, build a model instead of trying to like make it work across, let's say, different screens, right? Like than you do with Android, right? That's why all the best applications are always launched on Apple, even though Apple's market share is significantly lower than Android, right? And there's a reason because Apple is really good. I think that's going to be a pattern where the latest and the greatest is going to be launched on NVIDIA. Most adoption is going to happen across different GPUs. It has to because it's not sustainable the way it is right now, right? The cost structure. That's happening, but it's going to happen slowly. So you'll be starting off with older models. Like it takes about, for example, right? On Akash itself, we have something called Alpaca, which is like an open source version created by Stanford, which is equivalent to GPT, I think 3. Right? It's that powerful GPT-3. GPT-3 is really good, by the way. That's what ChatGPT was launched on, right? It's fully open source, so you can just like take it and just like deploy it and use it without paying OpenAPI, money, to use their APIs, right? And it takes about 5 hours to train on the lower end GPUs, cheap GPUs, right? I think looking at NVIDIA 4000s, I have a spec somewhere, but the same model, if you try to train on an H100, it takes about 10 minutes. On a cheaper one, it takes about 5 hours. So you, as a developer, have more optionality now to choose based on your preferences and your priorities, right? If you want faster training, use the advanced one, which you end up paying a lot more. But if you want slower, might as well. So imagine how many opportunities that's going to open up. I mean, we're really talking about like the world. I think the first application we're going to see that is going to take dominance is healthcare. Like if you think about it, right? If you go to a doctor, all doctors are doing is looking at your data, looking at your lab results, and looking at your conditions and trying to recollect from their memory what they learned in school and trying to reconstruct. And the chance of them getting it right is only as good as our human capability to get them right, right? So in a scenario like that, LLM has phenomenal recollection capability. It's just so good, right? And even GPT-3, which is like the older version, can outperform a diagnostics. And we're seeing a lot of examples today where people were saying they're like dogs. I mean, apparently there was a misdiagnosis from a vet about their pet, and without GPT, they would lose their pet. So we're seeing real stories like where GPT actually helped diagnose better. And we have 7 billion people, right? 8 billion people now. Imagine a GPT for each person, right? That can actually diagnose your lab results. That can give you fairly accurate results, like 99% time, accurate results about your health way before a doctor can look at it. And the amount of GPUs you need for that, we don't have enough H100s in the world, right? It's okay. It'll take like 5 hours to fine tune that versus 10 minutes. Right? I'm okay to wait 5 hours. And pay like, I don't know, $1 or $2 versus doing it in 10 minutes and paying, whatever. Right? So there's going to be a lot of sort of like need for lower end GPUs as the use case for AI expand. And I think that's why we're not like discounting the lower end GPUs, even though they may not be relevant now, but they will be relevant considering the use case that we have. Starting off with the most critical functions like healthcare. Imagine the people that don't have access to healthcare now in places that, over 1 billion people don't have access to decent healthcare. I mean, decent in the sense, I'm not talking about decent in the US standards, like just basic healthcare, right? Imagine them having a GPT doctor just sitting there and diagnosing people in Africa, right? Like it's a game changer. And I'm very, very excited about this.
You've highlighted a very exciting use case given how much peripheral experience I've had with the healthcare industry. And so I'm based in Florida, and this place is apparently one of the top places to get healthcare in the United States. And the United States is ostensibly one of the top places to get healthcare in the entire world. So by all measures, I have access to the best healthcare. And even then, the experience is so incredibly bad. You're only going to get really good healthcare from the top 1% of doctors, just period, right? Pareto distribution. And if you land in just a mid-tier category, if you just get like a mid-doctor, they're going to misdiagnose so many, they miss so many things.
They miss it.
Yeah. And they just go with what is currently prescribed or regulated in the industry. They're not necessarily at the forefront of research papers. They're not on top of it, right? There's no Dr. House.
Yeah.
If you get a Dr. House, you're paying private. You're probably a billionaire. You're, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And someone like Dr. House is not even allowed to operate in the medical field because of insane regulations around that.
Right.
Right. Even if he pulls some strings, circumvents some laws to save your life, he's going to get fired. AI is just not subjected to all that nonsense, all that red tape.
And that's another area. Basic healthcare to advanced healthcare, right? AI is so much better at summarizing, research, right? Like today, when I have a paper, I don't read the paper. I just send it to a summarizer model. I use ChatGPT as pretty good at summarizing, right? And it just summarizes for me, right? It explains in a language that's easy for me to digest. Even if you're a doctor, you can get better using AI, right? Just become a better doctor. I think the pattern is going to be if you deem a doctor can serve up to 10 patients a day, tomorrow's doctors will be able to serve up to 100 patients a day. Right? I think doctors are not going to go away. I think they're just going to get better with AI. And that means more accessible healthcare. And also, doctors are very reactive. They're not very proactive, right? There's no doctor monitoring your health 24 hours. Even though I have all my data, I have my blood pressure, all my sugar levels. I'm very pro sensor, person. I have my sleep that I track my sleep, and all that data is fed into the system, and that's just sitting idle. My heart rate and all that. Right? There's real time information that's sitting in the system. Ideally, I would love for someone to take a look at my vitals on a daily basis and proactively recommend lifestyle, recommend changes to my lifestyle, whatever. Right? I'm the kind of person who would look at my data and be like, okay, if I need to change something, I'll change something. But most of us, that get into ill health is because we don't know what we're doing is right
until
or wrong.
It's too late.
Until it's too late. So I think proactive healthcare is another great opportunity for AI to just take off. And if I'm not doing Akash, I'll probably do something in health. That's a passion of mine. Maybe I can do something too. I know a few folks are trying to use AI in healthcare, but I want to see more.
It almost eliminates human error. I mean, there is error in the AI too. Right now, if you're using ChatGPT to diagnose it, it'll get a lot of things wrong. Just because I've seen ChatGPT reference research papers that don't exist, period.
So it depends on the model. So GPT-3 is not as accurate. GPT-4 is way more accurate, significantly higher accurate, but it's super slow. And it's as good as the data you feed it, right? So it's a system that relies on continuous training. So the more people use it, the better it gets through reinforcement through a human, right? So there's quite a lot of the thing about AI is it doesn't degrade, but it gets better and better, right? So it's not something that gets bad over time, but actually can improve over time, which is very promising. So yes, results may not. That's why I don't think you're going to negate a need for a doctor. I think doctor is going to still do a verification of the diagnosis, right? If doctors, for example, if I'm a doctor and I looked at your data and I'm like, oh, this is what's happening, but the AI says, hey, maybe you should take a look at this as well. That's a net positive for me because I'm going to take a look at that, right? Things that I may have missed. And I'm going to tell the AI if it got it right or wrong. So that way I'm actually reinforcing the AI and training it, right? Whether it did it right or wrong. So I think that continuous improvement is very promising. So I think initially it's going to be okay, well, I'm going to see from 10 to 100. Now it's going to be 1,000 patients a day because of AI.
I would love for AI to almost remove the need for a doctor. I know that it's not ever going to go away, but to the extent that it can, I would love for that to happen and relegate them to, people who administers scans, right? They have the expensive equipment. You can't lower the cost barrier for that. You're just going to get your scans. It just emails the data to you, and then the AI reads it, and you could get your diagnosis from there. And then the AI gives you your prescription, and then you could change whatever it is that you need, and then maybe go to the doctor for actually like handwriting the prescription and getting the okay, right? Because they have power to do that.
That'd be a nice world, but I think I still would like a human being in the process. It's just like, would I be comfortable if the AI writes all my code, or would I want a human being just to take a look at it and like, make that moral decision? But question is, will AI get moral? That's when we get the AGI, right? Like, so, but morality is always almost biased. So it's kind of crazy, because as much as we don't want unbiased systems, we inherently prefer biases. It's kind of counter, sort of like intuitive, but that's how the world is. But if I would if you think about, I think there's a very good chance that there will be an AI run company, because AI is probably a better boss than a human being, because it's very unbiased. It's very it's very merit based, right? So I think I would actually prefer working for an AI boss than a human boss. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are going to be like DAOs run by AIs, right? Like an AI DAO just run by the bots, or like, I don't know, led by a bot. Like it's an algorithm that's making decisions, not a human being that's making decisions, right? Like that'd be interesting in the regulatory landscape. Imagine that DAO running on Akash. It's fully non-stoppable, AI run, AI making proposals, right? Like, oh, let's do the spend here, and it's not a human being that's making, like, then who do you hold accountable? If you see DAOs as the future of work, I see AIs coordinating these DAOs. I think that's going to be crazy. Web3 and AI are a lot more related than we anticipate. I think the first thing we're doing with crypto is we're saving AI with chips, right? There's really no other solution right now for the chip problem. The most viable solution is an open market for chips. So that's the first way we're saving AI. I think Web3 will also be the most sort of like, will add the rails to AI that's missing, all the way from organization, all the way from human coordination, payments or value exchange, to a lot more, right? So I think it's going to be most experimentation happening in Web3 on AI than anywhere else, in my opinion. And then you have provenance, which is a big problem, right? Like today, if you look at, I'm super excited for this use case, because it's very hard to say what is fake or what's real. It's going to get harder and harder and harder. Like, there's no doubt about it. And I think blockchains are phenomenal for provenance, right? Like, and that's an incredible use case for it, for AI. And I'm already seeing like decentralized training actually become a reality. I saw a BitTensor demo today, blew me away. It's they built a chatbot on top of on the BitTensor, a model trained using BitTensor, which is a project that I really respect. There's a lot of AI and blockchain bullshit happening, but I think there are a few legitimate projects that really needs to talk about. They don't have too much hype, which is good. It's all developers. There are stuff that's happening on the learning, fine-tuning, as well as inference phase. And BitTensor is one of my favorite, right? So if you think about it, they are like a human reinforcement. They incentivizing human reinforcers to train the AI, because AI has two components. It has the obvious GPU component, but also the human correction component, right? A human has to go correct it. Every time you go on ChatGPT and you put the thumbs up or thumbs down button, you're actually training ChatGPT. That's why that's very, very important, because that, number one, makes the model more accurate, but number two, removes the biases, right? Or like makes the biases a lot more distributed, right? That's why ChatGPT 3, when they released, it was very, very biased towards San Francisco users, right? Because it was trained by OpenAI. So it was very politically very, very, very aligned with San Francisco politics, right? But GPT-4 is a lot better, a lot less biased because it's trained by the world, right? So that's why I think like human reinforcement should be open to anybody in the world and should be accessible to public. And that's where BitTensor is doing an incredible job. And so something that's generated on BitTensor could have the provenance recorded on the blockchain and actually trace it back. And the creators will sign, right? Will sign on the blockchain and place the ownership or creatorship on the chain that can be traced all the way back. I think in one way to think about, AI is going to take Web3 to mainstream because of these inherent problems. That's my prediction.
It's funny you talk about the AI's political leanings. So OpenAI's was overtly left.
Yes.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
And then it's funny that when Microsoft came out with theirs, it arrived at the conclusions that the people on the right tend to conclude about certain topics. Microsoft had an open source AI when fed the same questions as they fed to OpenAI's model. It came out with a completely different answer.
Oh, that's because so Microsoft uses OpenAI. Was using a different model. GPT-3 came out in 2020, right? August 2020, I think. Obviously, it was not very popular, right? It was the AI winter. It was reinforced training by humans at OpenAPI offices in San Francisco. So obviously, this is 2020, was very political, and obviously it was very left-leaning because it was trained by mostly left-leaning employees of OpenAI. Whereas when they released ChatGPT to the world, and it started getting reinforced by the globe, when Microsoft finally introduced OpenAI integration, they were using GPT-4 way before ChatGPT actually raised GPT-4 internally. And GPT-4 happened to be based on the globe. And turns out most of the world is actually conservative, right? If we think about it, right? Most of the world is not extremely left-leaning like San Francisco. Like, it's not, right?
Yeah, it's interesting how the media is able to propagate the facade that the majority of the world is actually radically left-leaning when in fact they're not. They're more moderate.
Yeah, I think they're more moderate, or in traditional sense would be right-leaning, but I think they're the same. It's just the world is going left or right.
The Overton window has gone so left because the media reinforces that.
And I've been a San Francisco resident for 15 years, but I finally made the move to Texas, right?
Yeah, congrats.
And it's sad because it's obviously, it's very visible right now what's happening in San Francisco, and it's break. I mean, let's not get into politics, but most of the world that I know and in my people that I know tends to be more centered, more like, it's maybe not okay to have open air drug markets. Maybe the open air drug markets are not great for society. Things of that nature. It's crazy what's happening in San Francisco. It's really sad. And I don't want to end up like San Francisco.
Yeah, of course not. That's controlled demolition right there. The governance framework that you alluded to at the beginning of the interview, I want to unpack that just a little bit before we end the podcast, because that part's interesting to me. Just because of the current events in the regulatory world right now, there's a huge opportunity for people like us, builders in the decentralized netizen, the network state, to hearken to Balaji's book. There's a huge opportunity for us to step up to create regulatory frameworks for the online global economy that's powered by blockchain technology, because what the regulators are doing in meat space is so off the pulse of what's going on here. It's very obvious that their first instinct is to try to control rather than to protect consumers, because they obviously failed to do that. I wonder if there's a way for us to make a clean decoupling from meat space regulation. We're terraforming Mars and building an economy on Mars. So the people who live on Mars and understand the situation should be the ones governing Mars. We should self-elect and create frameworks and everything. And it's as if the people who live on Earth think that they have a right to govern Mars as well, even though they've never stepped foot on Mars. They've never used any DeFi protocols. They don't know anything about it.
They only look at the bad part and not look at the good part, right? That's what it looks like. And there, obviously, it's very evident right now with what's happening from the U.S. regulatory overreach. I would call it executive over. I guess all brands, just a government to a degree, is overreaching on crypto. And it's very clear, right? Like Senator Warren creating a anti-crypto army, as she calls it, is very clear that they do not like crypto.
They were trying to say big pharma, big this, as if to
wealthy crypto investors, they call it.
The way you refer to agriculture, right? Pharmacy, it's big pharmaceuticals, big agriculture. They tried to mean that as if there were some kind of centralized core netting billions of dollars, accumulating it under one company in crypto.
It's a big topic, right? How do we decouple from an overreach by the state in trying to administer or govern instead of trying to regulate? We want regulation. We don't want governance. Right? This whole point. Well, how do you do that? Is decoupling the human being from the algorithm, right? So the more resilient the protocols or the systems in general are to state level actors, the better. And how do you get there? Well, let's remove humans as much as possible. Let's start off with resource acquisition, right? How does an organization acquire resources to perform its function? Start off with computational resources in the digital space, right? Ultimately, and then we transition to a non-computational resource, be it human resource, in the meat space, right? In the digital realm, we can kind of do quite a lot with the existing tools we have, right? Like a DAO can essentially, and we're starting to see, right? We're starting to see some deployments on IPFS, on Akash, on RV, and all that stuff, where DAOs can essentially, deploy without touching the source code that they're going to deploy, right? And we have things like Gitopia and whatnot, where you have, Gitopia is another upcoming Cosmos project I'm excited about, where you have the developers developing the source code and committing to the repos, and there's an autonomous agent that can actually take the source code, build it in real time, and with the logs all verifiable, so that it can be easily audited by the public that need to, and deploy that on Akash, fully interoperate end to end, and acquire resources, using the Gitopia tokens. You can swap those tokens to whatever AKT you need to do on a decentralized exchange and actually go deploy on Akash, right? Right now we have the technology to do that. And I think those workflows are going to be a lot more obvious as this technology is mature. And now we can use, and you still have the human component, which is coding. So one of the cool features in Gitopia that they're working on is bounties. So you can actually, an AI can actually be like, look, I need a system that can do XYZ, and I'm going to put a $10,000 on this particular piece of code on Gitopia, fully anonymously, coded by a human being if it has to, right? So there's a lot of foundational, from a protocol level, that can essentially remove a human being from directing and coordinating, and have a machine and an AI do the coordination for you, right? We have the technologies right now. Just need someone to take a look at all this stuff and actually use them and build a fully autonomous DAO. But a DAO can host, a DAO can assign work, a DAO can pay for that assigned work using tokens it creates or acquires somehow. And DAO can be run by an AI, right, to a certain degree. And I would love to just see experiments on DAOs that are just trading DAOs, completely run by algorithms, just making money, right? Just making money, and trading is the simplest thing because you can do completely on chain. It doesn't require computational resources to actually now building, right? And being a little more creative with what it can build, along with incentivizing human beings for the human tasks, right? And there's a great opportunity right now for Mechanical Turk to be decentralized. I'm still surprised why there's no decentralized Mechanical Turk. We saw that in West. I won't, it's a bad example, but in Westworld. Remember this market, a job market that's fully autonomous? And I think in season 2 of Westworld, I think they were using a blockchain too. I can't remember, but that's a possibility, right? An AI creating jobs in a decentralized job market or like a gig market of some sort. Right? That's a possibility, right? So I think we're very close. And like if you have a decentralized gig market, the AI can now reach the meat space too. And now who are you going to go after? Like the AI? Like AI can purchase real world assets. Like AI can run a real estate sort of like business pretty well, I think. I think people from the meat space to go do things. We're at least like 1 year to 2 years there. So I think AI run DAOs. And when AI needs to run something, it's not going to go to the Secretary of State to register his business. It's going to create a DAO, right? And a DAO is going to, and no one needs to know, like everything happens, like, and no one, you'll see the DAO, but there's no human being actually that's controlling the DAO. So is it going to benefit humans or not? I don't know. I think the regulators are going to look at like where the money is flowing ultimately, and we're going to figure out ways, but I think that's the first step.
So if we go back to the early days of the US when the country was being instantiated, that kind of thinking, how can we create a completely parallel, separate economy from Great Britain, who's trying to control us and tax us and do all of these things, right? We need to fight. We need to fight a revolution. We need to get away from them and create a new constitution, create a new system of governance with checks and balances, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the lines that I'm thinking of to get away from this overreach.
And then that comes down to whoever has the guns, right? So, I mean, you won the war.
It does.
Guns, right? Like
it really does.
I hope we won't go. We don't need to go there, right? Like we won the war, the Revolutionary War, because there's a military advantage. Without that, I don't think just declaring independence gave us independence, right? So they took like 5 years of struggle from the independence declaration to actually establish Washington, D.C., right? Or like Philadelphia, as a matter of fact. I hope it won't be that. I think in a way, social media today is a lot more powerful, right? It's all very powerful. The social structures are powerful enough for attracting people with guns, I suppose, right? Like ultimately, can AI go hire people with guns? I think it can. I think before AGI, I think the danger of like AI controlling humans or incentivize humans to kill for it is more of a reality than AGI controlling machines and killing.
I mean, that's another way to achieve the same outcome, right?
Yeah, but yes. Yeah, like, there are a lot of bad people in the world that would kill for like very little amount, right? Like if you look at some of these countries, some of the poor countries, they can kill for like $5 to $10. So what's going to prevent an AI from creating an army of these like people and going after things it doesn't need to? So hopefully we won't get there. We don't need to, right? I think the first decoupling is really like, we don't have to go that far. I think we got to look at all the attack vectors. Today's biggest attack vector happening with securities violation, and that comes down to like, oh, is there a common enterprise that's, issuing a contract where it's raising funds to develop something, and the value of that, what's developing, comes because of efforts of seeing the enterprise or not, right? So going to this whole like, is it a single company or is it going to be a lot of people, or is it? Or there's no company, right? There's just a algorithm detecting all that. And I think that's the first step in terms of we can do this legally and we don't have to go illegal methods, right? There are a lot of legal ways to do this. I think it's going to be very challenging. I think it's going to be very, very challenging for regulators that employ the current methods without new tools from Congress to keep up with the kind of stuff that AI is going to be bringing to the table. I think we need legislation and meaningful regulation, right? We want regulation and we want legislation that can look at the 100 years of progress we've made since Howie, take into account the digital assets and digital future and AI along with it. And we need common sense laws, right? Like, so I think all that is going to be, I think this current overreach by the state is just temporary. Like, I don't see this lasting more than maybe a few years, right? I mean, they're doing everything they can, but there's even like talks at the highest levels in DC about this very problem, how regulators are doing extreme overreach. I mean, it's really executive overreach on crypto, right? If you think about it. But they did this before. They did this with Crypto 1.0. If you look at the original crypto wars of the 80s, the 90s, right? This happened before. It just happened.
Cryptography, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. The Crypto 1.0 wars, right? And it happens a lot. Government tends to, anything they deem to be threat, they tend to take an adversarial position. And eventually they learn that it's actually helping them. So I think what is true is there is a lot of bad activity in crypto and a lot of centralized players like SBFs and FTXs of the world that should be weeded out, right? And that's true. Hopefully regulators will focus on businesses like that instead of coming after companies.
Do you not see that they seem to be complicit? Not even complicit, that's a generous word, that they were almost mutually benefiting each other.
But they had SEC had about 8 meetings with FTX as far as I recall, and they didn't catch any of them. And it's not new. Same thing with Madoff, right?
Isn't it interesting how the people that were regulating us using FTX as the example of what the space ought not to be were the ones working and profiting from FTX, yet they're using it as an excuse to justify the overreach.
It's not the first time. It happened with Madoff. SEC investigated Madoff 4 or 5 times and they gave him a pass. Madoff was also one of the key players in SEC. I can't remember this whole story about Madoff, but it's not the first time. They tend to be extremely favorable for virtue signaling fraudsters, right? That tends to be like a common pattern. I think Congress should scrutinize the regulators as to why they let this behavior persist throughout different generations of scams. And I think those are some of the common sense legislation I'd like to be revisited for the last 10, 100 years. This was created 100 years ago as an organization, hasn't quite evolved with the same interest of the public, right? So I think like these institutions that were created in times that are not designed to address the current modern times should be demolished and should be looked at and should be rebuilt with new common sense legislation. That's my take. It's also like a bill now in Congress to demolish the SEC. I think that's just one of the factors. I think there's going to be quite a lot of this, like the courts are acting up, right? Courts are now showing favorable, I guess, like judgments towards crypto. The legislation is coming up. I think America is set up for whatever faults America has is still the greatest country. Like, I don't think any other country that comes close to the strength of the legal system that we have in the US. So I think if you go to traditional channels, we're going to see change, and we saw this before. I'm actually very optimistic for US crypto. We are operating in the US. We don't plan on going anywhere. There are a lot of us like us, right? We operate in the US. Maybe disruption in the short term, but on the long term, we're very... you're seeing this, right? I mean, the moment US went super anti-crypto, we're seeing other countries spring up, and like countries like Dubai and Singapore and all those countries, not Singapore, Hong Kong, and even seemingly Asia, China now, right? All those are UK, as a matter of fact, all having common sense legislation. And I would never start a company in Europe. I think Europe has got much deeper problems than US. But there are opportunities now springing up across the world. And US is not the only, place in a globally connected economy. It's a very important place, but it's not the only place, right? So, and I think like from crypto evolution, like one of the examples, Akash, obviously, is like looking at the real world and like solving this GPU supply chain problem. I think more and more of those problems crypto can solve, more and more obvious it can be from a regulatory standpoint, because now it's not about taking power away from the state, it's about making the state more powerful, right? In Akash, in US, secondary market for GPUs will make America a lot more competitive, right? Just in general. So I think like changing the tone from like, hey, we're not trying to disrupt an existing industry, we're actually solving new problems in creative ways. And this is how crypto solves, because there's no other solution that's more optimal than open market for such critical resources, right? Let's go about why are commodities all closed, why our commodities market so flows, right? There's so much opportunity there in general to make the country a lot more competitive, right? So those things are going to just come out as crypto evolves, and crypto is not going to go anywhere. Everything's getting better and better and better. And with tools like ZK, with tools like NFTs, as a matter of fact, I'm actually a lot more bullish on NFTs now than I was during the bull market. Now that the tourists have left, I'm seeing a lot of use cases that are just brilliant. Like, like on Akash itself, a lease could be an NFT, right? A lease gets created every time we have an agreement on like how much, you're a provider, I'm the payer, and I got some H100s and I have a lease, I can sell that lease in open market, right? Now that lease becomes a tradable commodity because now I have access to H100s, right? So imagine the efficiency that brings by bringing a futures market to Akash itself. Simple things like that. Now that we have, when the quieter, like the time, and now the tourists have left, and Eminem sold is like, his Bored Ape at a loss, and he's never going to come back. Thank God.
No, he'll come back, but at the peak.
After peak, yeah, sure. That's the kind of stuff I feel like bull markets obviously create distractions that are good in a way. It's fun. It's sometimes okay to get distracted, but the real building happens in a bear market, and we're seeing that 90% drop in like crypto funding now, which is glad because all the fakers are gone and they're finding other things. I mean, AI, it's got a lot of people now that are just, holy shit, the funding in AI.
The 2017 ICO experts are now 2023 AI experts.
Correct. So have you seen some of this obvious scams coming to crypto, but they're getting weeded out very quickly, which I'm glad. Bear market is great for that. Right?
By the way, has anyone heard from Blue Kirby in a minute?
Oh yeah, what happened to Blue Kirby? It was all crypto. It was all Cosmos for a bit. When
Cosmos was hot, fair weather friends.
Yeah, no longer friend. I never heard of the guy. Scott, does he still exist? And Osmos is doing good, right? I mean, they're doing so much cool stuff. I mean, token prices obviously hasn't not aligned with their improvements, concentrated liquidity and all that good stuff they're doing. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening, and people are not paying attention, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That all the grifters.
I would agree. It's a total mid thing to just look at price and say, okay, this directly correlates and maps 1-to-1 to the quality of the project.
So obvious. And liquidity will be back, and all the institutional. I mean, it's also like pretty evident now, like with the BlackRocks of the world and the Fidelities of the world, having products that can reach a lot of mainstream audience that were not able to achieve before. All these signals are just going to be like, hey, look, pain is temporary and necessary, part of a healthy market. I'm even seeing like people that are very anti-crypto actually turning now, like people like Jason Calacanis, who I don't have high regard, but he was very anti-crypto for a long time, but now he's actually like looking at some of this stuff, and he's looking at the good stuff, and that's good, right? That's good. We are able to convince a lot of non-believers during a bear market.
When can people expect mainnet?
Mainnet coming in the next few weeks. So mainnet 6 with GPU capabilities and stable payments, which is awesome. It's been a big feature request for Akash. Turns out people don't want to pay with AKT, AKT being volatile, and it's not good if you're running long-running workloads. So now you can actually host AI models and pay using USDC. First time ever happening. This model where you can actually host a self-custodial AI model and pay using USDC, and we'll also have Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin. Hopefully, we're trying to work with any of the wrap Bitcoins right now with Axelar, I believe. When Bitcoin comes, can it come natively on Akash?
After September.
How?
You'll see.
Okay. Whenever
go to Stanford Blockchain Conference.
I'm talking to David Say in 3 minutes. Is David involved from Babylon?
There's no need for an intermediary chain for this.
Wow. Okay. So whenever Bitcoin comes natively to Akash, you'll be able to, or natively to IBC, you'll be able to host a AI model and pay using sats. I think that's going to open up a lot more doors. We have so much work to do on AI, so many models to train. Also, we're doing something very, very cool for Cosmos. Not going to say what it is, but there will be a model focused on Cosmos ecosystem. And
A model.
a model. That's how much I'm going to say.
Okay. A model. Got it.
A model that's Cosmos ecosystem focused. That'll help everybody in the Cosmos ecosystem immensely. And it will be trained on Akash, launched on Akash, be fully open source. So I'm super excited for that. I mean, I saw the model working and I was like, holy shit, I wish I had this.
When it's ready, you'll come back on the podcast. Look forward to that podcast when it comes.